Welcome to How to End Writer's Block Fast. This ain't no slow shit. We're gonna get you dialed in quick. Right after I drink this WAP juice. 69 grams of protein per sip. Got my hardwood shirt on because we will be handling our hardwood later. So here's the question. Does music theory ruin creativity? Well, when I first picked up the guitar, I had a lot of people telling me this. I remember one guitarist in particular who was further along than me said it would stifle my imagination. And to be honest, when I first started going to music school, I did feel a creative limiting. I was taking 21 credit hours and I was really just kind of overwhelmed with everything that I was learning. By the time my sophomore year rolled around, I started to see it change and all of the new information began to slowly come out of my playing naturally. I mean, there's no way I would have discovered things like chromatic medians or XLs on my own. You just have to stick with it because like any skill, it takes time. Now, during a recent lesson with a student, I had something interesting happen. He shared an aggravating problem he's been struggling with. What if I have an idea, but then I don't know where to take it next? Maybe you can relate, right? I mean, sometimes you come up with a riff, but then it's like, now what? I know this is a frustration that I came across many times. And I mean, I still do. Let's say you got a riff or an idea going and you just sort of keep repeating it over and over again. And when you try something new, like a connecting phrase, it just doesn't fit. It's easy to start something right, but finishing it is a challenge. So what do? You shelve your idea and you start working on something else only to encounter the same problem again. It's crazy. The maddening, endless cycle. But one day, I'm sitting in orchestration class, right? This is like the year 1803, back when I was going to school. And my professor said something that completely changed the game for me when it comes to songwriting. He said, Scott, composition is just repetition and development. I was like, wait. What the fuck? It was like a light bulb went off in my head at that moment. Suddenly, everything started to make a lot more sense. Because here's the thing, most of us are fine with that first part, just coming up with an idea. But then the next part where we build on that and develop it and take it somewhere, that's the hard part. True art of composition is in the development of an idea. This is where music theory really is a massive help. Composers back in the day would practice the art of composition with sonata form, and sonata form contained the exposition section in the beginning. Then it had the development part, and this is where you took the thematic material in the beginning and maybe you changed the key of it or extended like the rhythm, made the notes longer in the melody or shorter. So the question is, how do we develop a musical idea? Now this lesson, I'm going to show you 3 ways to take your material somewhere interesting if you feel stuck. We'll be using the 3 primary elements of composition and music itself, which of course are melody, harmony, and rhythm. Okay, so here we are in Guitar Pro, and what I want to do is just take you through the composition process, at least the way I do it. There's a lot of different ways you can approach composition, but what I'm going to show you today is something that always works. Now, the very first thing you want to do when you start making music is establish a tonal base in your mind and in your ears. And we do that through the pedal tone. If you ever seen the meme, you know, when I hear oh, oh, oh as a metalhead, I'm just like, that's amazing. This goes a lot deeper than people realize because it's the essence of tonality itself. This is how all Western music is formed. So today, what we're gonna do is use our open 5th string, that A note, as our pedal tone bass. And that's what's going on here in the first example. Now this may seem simple, but I promise it's worth it. A lot of times we just want to skip ahead and we start getting really technical and playing lots of notes. And if you listen to any popular song let's say Running with the Devil by Van Halen, what you're going to hear is that reference to the root pounded into your brain over and over and over. Michael Anthony, the bass player, is just hitting his open low E string. Boom, 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 right? And then Eddie comes in with his riff. But without that tonal framework, that foundation, the rest of what you play has no, what I call the C word, context. Now, once we have our C word context established, you have to have like a mood, right, that you want to pursue. Like, what's the vibe that you're going for? And what I suggest is checking in with yourself. Like, maybe you've had, a negative experience at work or with other people, or maybe you're on cloud fucking 9 right now. I don't know. But think about what you're feeling at this moment and try to channel that through your music. And if you don't know what you're feeling, or you're disconnected with yourself, or you're like, what is a self? Then think about my PMS strategy, which is a way to force inspiration. P stands for personal experience, maybe something formative in your past, maybe when you traveled somewhere or broke up with an ex. The M stands for movies and music. You could think about a film that was inspirational to you, or a song. And then the last one, S, stands for stories. I like to go to Greek mythology, things like the Battle of Troy. That's a way to get you into that compositional headspace where you're inspired. I always feel minor feelings. I'm just a melancholic kind of guy. So I chose the minor scale, and that's this next example here. Now, the minor scale against a pedal tone, you can really hear it, right? These are sad feelings. That sink into your soul. Of course, it's sad because it's got the minor third in there. If it was a major third, okay, now we're happiness and roses and unicorns and all that crap. Maybe, you choose a different mode like Lydian or Lydian dominant. So I promise this is again where theory really helps you out, because it exposes you to emotions that you didn't even know you could feel. Like when I went to music school and I started listening to music in the library, hearing like Debussy and Ravel and Stravinsky, I was like, hold on. I didn't even know that was an emotion that I just felt right there. Okay, so you've got like a tonal framework, a bass, that O. It's the music of the spheres, the tonal resonance that results from the mathematical relationships between the heavenly bodies. That may sound like a lot of woo-woo bullshit, but I don't know. I think maybe there is some truth to it. Now, let's be honest. You need a way to hook a listener in. Once you have sort of this basic structure in place, you got the pedal tone, then you've got the, what was the second thing we did? The scale, right? So you have like a mood established. And now we need a melody. A melody is that line you sing in the shower. It's Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, right? Of course, that's like the worst melody of all time, but also the best melody of all time because of its very simplistic structure. I always use that as an example. But that's what a melody is. And what you have to figure out for your song, if you want it to be a good song, this is not debatable, unfortunately, unless you're making music for, I don't know, aliens or snakes or rocks or anything that's not a Homo sapien. But Homo sapiens, aka people, like melody. And a melody is that top line that you have going over everything else. It's what the singer is doing, right? It's what everybody's paying the most attention to. So here is a melody. And I really encourage you to keep your melodies simple and stepwise. What does stepwise mean? That just means that you're not making big jumps. So these two notes right here, A and B, those are right next to each other in the scale. I'm not going like that or some insane, skip. This just makes everything feel more smooth and natural. And also, I just kept it to 2 bars. This is not a magnum opus composition that just never ends. We think maybe we'll impress people when we do that by, reinventing the rules. Just don't do that. So this is nice and simple, right up the A minor scale. Very elegant and basic, and you're going to thank yourself for this later, because when you build additional elements onto your compositional structure, it really helps to have a simplistic foundation for clarity. That's another C word that we're interested in as composers. Now, where toeth nexteth in our compositional journey? And the answer is, we're going to put everything together thus far. And this is probably the first step where it actually seems like, a complete musical idea. So we've got the scale and the pedal tone happening here in this next example, and the melody is on top. And the second we put that melody into the mix with just a basic rhythm here, I just have 8th notes for the rhythm, then you're like, oh shit, that could be a song. Oh yeah, out of me demon spirits. And there we have it. I'm not thinking about rhythm at this point, right? So we're primarily focused on getting that melody out against the pedal, which automatically gives you a bit of harmonic information. Of course, it sounds like we're playing a minor chord, right? Because we are. Okay, now this, I think, is a critical juncture where most people get stuck in their writing. You have something that feels like a musical idea, but now what? It's like you just keep repeating that over and over again. How do you take this somewhere interesting and feel like there's movement? Like if you watch a good film, you need plot points. You need something happening in the story that maintains your interest. And when you try the next idea, maybe it's just a completely different idea, and you're like, fuck, that doesn't work. And this is what I was talking about earlier. This is where composition isn't intuitive, and it's more challenging than a lot of people think. This is why people study theory at music school, because developing something and turning it into something greater while still being based on that original seed of material isn't easy. The next thing I'm going to show you here is a game changer, and this is how to take your riff idea through a chord progression. Typically when people hear this, they're like, ding, 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 ding. Okay, that's what I need for my song. Because just playing that one figure over and over again, you're stuck. But this is a way to change emotions and drive the piece forward towards a climax, but still have it sound like, oh, that's that thing he was doing before. So the ideas are connected. So what happened there? Basically, I took our original figure, which is here, right? That's this. And I changed the chord behind it. So instead of it being an A minor, I changed it to an F major. Now, how do you do that? Well, just instead of having an A in the bass, change it to the 8th fret of the 5th string, which is an F note. But then I played the same melody on top. Now, that right there is the secret. So now we have, instead of, and then I did the same thing with an E in the bass, and then resolved it to that note. So essentially, what's happening now is the human emotional experience is being taken through this sonic storyline, right? And it's a tension and release archetype. So we have the 1 chord, which is the A minor, then the 6th chord. That really gives us a Lydian vibe. So that's the Lydian sound. And that gives us feelings of nostalgia, right? Or deep reflection. And then when you get to the 5 chord E, things really get to their maximum tension point. Everything in that 5 chord is crying for release back to the 1, you know. Again, that same melody, but then resolving down to that raised 3rd. So really now I cheated a little bit. I played harmonic minor instead of regular Aeolian or natural minor. And that's what gives us that neoclassical vibe. And it also increases our capacity to resolve tension. It makes the tension greater because having a leading tone, or that G sharp 1/2 step away from the root, really pulls up, really wants to do something like that. Now this brings me to my next point, which is when you're writing a piece of music, have a perspective of the harmony, you know, like have a general idea of what chord progression you're taking people through and establish one. I know as like electric guitar players, oftentimes, you know, we're riffing around, and that's kind of like a rhythmic and melodic sort of experiment, but it's hard sometimes to gain perspective on the chords. So if you're able to think about, you know, playing your riff through a chord progression, you're going to be way ahead of the game. And one way you can do that is play your block chords just separately, you know, the ones that you want to fit the melody behind. So you could use like 2 separate tracks, you know, record the first part, you know, and then lay the melody over top just to get a perspective on things. So the block chords, you know, that I'm basically going through here are A minor, and then F, and E. Very simple progression. Okay, once we've completed, you know, the melody and the harmony, there's one last musical element, right, that I discussed earlier. And this is a really big one, actually, and that's rhythm. And I would suggest, oftentimes, this comes best at the end. I mean, you can usually start a song with a rhythmic idea as well, but it's overall less crucial to the musical structure. Now that being said, again, rhythm can really take your song from here to here. It can be that final piece to the puzzle. It's just easier to conceptualize a musical structure, thinking about, you know, things like the melody first, because that's what people are going to like hum back to themselves most often. That's why the singer is out in front of the stage and the drummer is in the back of the stage, right? Sorry, Tommy Lee. He tried once, right, to put his drums at the front of the stage, but just ended up in the back again. So here is our first attempt at putting some rhythm to our idea. And I've done like the very standard metal thing here where we put a gallop rhythm behind the riff. So By gallop, I mean you have an eighth note and two 16th notes. Bum, 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 bum. Sounds like a horse galloping along into battle. So that really adds a lot of energy, doesn't it? And it completely gives you a new perspective on the original material, that main theme. Another thing we do is make those eighth note triplets. That's 3 notes per beat. So hopefully by now you've got a few ideas under your belt in terms of what to do when you get stuck. Writer's block should never be a thing that stops you, really, because it's like, oftentimes we see composing and writing songs as a mystical process, like waiting for lightning to strike, or like, just every once in a while you get inspired, or maybe, once every 6.9 months, you light the candles and sit in the middle of a pentagram and wait for Lord Satan to give you, melodic dictation. But the truth is that composing and writing songs is a muscle that you can develop with practice. And everything I've showed you today, whenever you do feel like you're stuck, you should be able to call these up and just eliminate that block in your writing immediately. I'm not saying it's always going to be your best work, but oftentimes, when you pull these particular levers and squeeze these triggers, you will find yourself getting into that inspired territory pretty quickly. So the next thing I want to show you is a complete sort of sketched out riff. This could be a chorus, it could be a verse that a singer, is throwing down his lines over. So I'm going to play it for you, and then we'll discuss in a little bit more detail how I used all the previous elements prior in the lesson to develop this composition. So here in bar 1, it's just our main theme, right, with the pedal. So nothing fancy there, and just starting with a simplistic origin gives you room to build. If you start at level 420, where are you going to go from there? After I state the main theme, I change the chord to that F. That gives us that Lydian sound, which is absolutely gorgeous. It goes from like minor and sad to nostalgic and reflective. It's a very good emotional pairing. Also have the first introduction of 16th notes here at the end of this bar, which creates more rhythmic intensity and interest. As we get into the next bar of Lydian, I'm continuing that melody, and then the chugs start right here at the end of this bar, that gallop. And this is really leading our anticipation to a greater and greater climax. And here's the payoff in the 5 chord. So the 5 chord is E, and now the rhythmic energy is even more intense. So I'm just continually, I'm continually increasing the speed, basically, of the rhythm. Now this bar right here, oh, I love this because we've got the E and then the F, which F stands for fuck, of course. But this chord right here, the E sus, are you kidding me? Like just that beautiful cry for release. It really just wants to go somewhere, and kind of having the F as a main character, or more like a sub character in the plot, really increases our anticipation. Now, once we get back to the beginning, so this is a loop. I'm repeating the idea. And this, again, is where I think most of us fall off the rails, because when it comes time to repeat, it gets boring if you just say the same thing. You know, how do you develop? It's that the key word is the D word there, development. Double D's. Just think about double D's, even though it's just one D that I'm talking about here. What I did was I harmonized the melody. So instead of it's now that really is great for the listener, because you're like, oh yeah, I know that. But then it's something that has grown and blossomed into a more, I don't necessarily want to say a greater version, but it's just, you know, things have to progress in life, right? If you're in a relationship or if you're at a job, if you don't move down the line and improve and grow, it's just things get stagnant and it sucks. And the same thing goes for music. So now I prepare for the F chord with a little climb right here, which is really fun. So we're back to F Lydian here, and now we have an arpeggio happening, which just gives us a different angle on the material. And things are becoming more complex as this piece progresses. What next? Now we have another Lydian bar. A lot more chugs and interesting rhythms. Now I break out all the stops. When we get to this neoclassical resolution or suspension and resolution sequence, this is your time to shine. When you get to that 5 chord, man, just let it all out and, you know, blow your load, so to speak, right? So we've got an E chord happening here, and I'm arpeggiating it with this interesting sort of figure. At least I thought it was interesting. It's kind of a lot too, you know, what I'm playing here. This wouldn't necessarily, maybe it would work in a pop song, but it would be a big risk to do this. So this is more, of course, what's acceptable in metal and progressive music. And it's a way to outline that neoclassical suspension and resolution sequence. And I want to show you like what the basic structure of that is, right? So here is the block chords you can play to get that sound. So like this, you got A minor over E, E sus4, and then E. Back to the 1. And so I'm outlining that idea with an arpeggio. And this is just kind of fun, you know, because it's a little bit more challenging to play. You're working on your chops, but you're also working on your composition. So if you can ever combine the discipline of technique and writing music simultaneously, I think you're way out of the game, because a lot of times we get stuck playing like chromatic scales and exercises that you don't necessarily use in songs, right? But this is a way to make your technical training useful. And then, of course, that leads us back into the 1 chord home bass. So what's next? I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Keep your eyes peeled, because there will be more in this series of how to end writer's block. We're going to be going deeper into compositional devices. I'm thinking things like modal mixture, counterpoint, technique, and a lot more. I also want to hear from you. Like, what do you struggle with specifically in regards to writing music? Like, what's the challenges? What are the hurdles? Do you get stuck where I thought you got stuck? Do you get stuck where I pointed out most people get stuck? Or is it another part of the process? Until next time, shred until death.